Right, in the last moments of this hour, we are going to move on to talk about King Charles' first year on the throne. And joining me to do this is Rupert Bell, who is Talk Radio's royal correspondent. Rupert, how are you doing today?
Very good. Talking to you from a field in Oxfordshire, Cornbury Park, just outside where there's some horse trials going on. Enjoying a very pleasant day out in the sunshine, but with lots of other people enjoying a bit of horse sport in the afternoon. So all's well.
I can only imagine that a royal correspondent would also go to horsey events at the weekend. That seems very fitting of a man of your calibre, breeding and esteem. So 1 year on the throne for Charles. We've got lots to discuss, haven't we? You've got the Invictus Games, you've got Harry in the country, you've got William paying tribute to his late grandmother, you've got all the reflections on her reign, and of course now we're at the year stage where we can reflect on our current monarch's reign. How do you think he's doing? Do you think he's taken people by surprise? Because I think at one point people thought he was going to be a bit of a caretaker king and essentially sort of, you know, sitting in position before William comes along and will really revitalise the monarchy. And yet I think people are actually rallying around him and he's doing a pretty decent job.
I think he's doing exactly, in a way, what he wants to do is leave the monarchy fit for purpose for his son. And that means keeping a steady hand on the tiller, not rocking the boat, making sure that he ensures the monarchy remains relevant for the people of Britain and that it has a purpose and it is fit for purpose. And that's what his primary role is. And it has been, I have to say, you know, a very steady start. And the odd little blip we may have seen, but overall it's been I think a very good first year. And I think he can reflect a year on as he starts his second year as king of this country, that it's gone quite well. But when you think there are all these other distractions that are coming at him with the family rifts and trying to make sure that the monarchy sort of has the soft power element of being the monarch has a place to play in the modern Britain. And of course, when you think that 12 months ago we had Liz Truss as the Prime Minister, there's been some seismic changes politically in terms of what's been going on, and yet he's now trying to make sure that he can navigate through as head of state to ensure that the monarchy is something that he can leave his mark on.
I mean, for a man in his 70s, he really has been a bit of a moderniser, and you'd think quite fitting for the 21st century with his approach to things like slimming down the monarchy, making sure that you haven't got a load of dukes and duchesses no one's ever heard of, ribbon cutting and living off, you know, the taxpayer or the crown estate. And at the same time, he's been championing environmental issues for years now. I think he's probably one of the first people to talk about stuff like climate change before anybody else was. And then, of course, he's also been a huge campaigner for very tasteful housing and urban developments. Again, that is something that is on the agenda of politics right now. Do you think that this is going to be enough to keep people's faith in the monarchy? And I suppose most importantly, when we live in a globalised world of great change where there are sort of arguments about things like reparations and so on and so forth, whether this is going to be enough to keep the Commonwealth bound together and keep some of the other countries and nations of which he is head of state away from having referenda to overturn that?
Well, to begin with, I think he had no choice, and some of the streamlining of the monarchy has been foisted upon him. You know, Meghan and Harry deciding enough is enough, and Duke of York, obviously, with his problems being cast asunder as well. So it sort of streamlined itself by default to some extent, but he absolutely does want to make sure that it's not just, as you say, one or two dukes and duchesses going around and sort of off the back of it and representing the royal family. If you look at a lot of other countries with royal families, it is a much more top to bottom. It's going down the sort of first line. And that's really where he wants to go. He needs support, and of course he's got it from his sister. He's also got it from his younger brother as well, the Duke of Edinburgh, and his wife. So there's definitely got a small team, and it is now a small team, but he knows that that's what's got to happen. Obviously, Harry would have played, if he hadn't gone, an important part, because he did before his split. He was a very popular figure, as we're seeing with his role at the Invictus Games, and indeed when he came to the World Child Awards earlier in this week. But the restrictions has come, I think, as I say, by default. The role within the Commonwealth, that's going to be a work in progress, but he's not going to stop countries. He's not going to make it. If countries want to leave and no longer have him as a head of state, he sees that, well, that's the way the world is progressing, and perhaps he's going to, not saying encouraging it, but he's not going to put up any sort of fuss. He's not really in a position to, and I think that's the important thing. But the Commonwealth in a modern Britain is a very important institution, because as we're well into the post-European phase, the Commonwealth is somewhere Britain can maybe exert some authority and influence with all the other geopolitical problems that are going on. The Commonwealth has an important part to play for Britain.
Oh, indeed. And actually, I think you'd find a lot of members of the Commonwealth would say that it plays an important role for them as well. I mean, far more members now in the Commonwealth. People who are never even in the British Empire applying to join, and some of the fastest growing GDP on planet Earth. Now, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you about Harry, of course, who was in town doing a stopover before he headed off to Germany for the Invictus Games. You know, but back he was, I assume, staying at Frogmore. I'm not sure where he laid his head to rest while he was in town, but seemingly not able to schedule, didn't want to schedule, or was refused a meeting with his relatives.
Well, basically, I think there's an element of logistics. I don't think he wants to be here any longer than he's needed to be. Coming in for the World Child Awards, it's something that he's been involved with for a very long time. And again, a year ago is when he couldn't go to it, because that was the day his mother died, his grandmother died a year ago. So it's quite normal for him to come to that. The Invictus Games, we know, is something that he's absolutely passionate about. And I think the logistics, but I don't think there's any hurry for William to talk to his brother, because he just doesn't trust him at the moment. And until they see a thawing, and they think, and the members of the royal family think it has to come from Harry rather than the other way round, because he's the one throwing the sort of slings and arrows at the royal family, and there will be more revelations in Omid Scobie's book in a couple of months' time. So the royal family at the moment are not in any hurry, but it must be distressing for the king that he can't actually see his son and his grandchildren as well, because they're over in California and they're showing no inclination of trying to build bridges.
No, indeed. But, I mean, it seems to me, and I wonder what you think about this, I always get the impression that over the past year that Charles is really pushing William and really pushing Kate especially, perhaps to sort of serve as a counterbalance to the noise that comes from the Sussexes. But perhaps in a very humble way, he is pushing the next generation. He realises he doesn't have a huge amount of time on the throne, and is trying to shore up the prevalence and the popularity of those who are coming after him.
Well, yes, and I think William and the Prince and Princess of Wales have done a pretty good job. The next stage will be how do they connect with the younger generation? Does the monarchy have a place to play in a modern Britain? And it will behove William to make sure that that is the case. And he will, I'm sure, be thinking about that. These things, a lot have gone into the preparations for when the king eventually took over from his mother, and it'll be the same next time round. It'll be a different dynamic, a different feel. But then you've got to look at, with George coming along, how do they make sure that the sort of younger generation believe in the institution in a modern Britain?
Indeed. I mean, do you think, actually, before I let you go, do you think we should have a bit more Charles? Because I feel, actually, that I don't feel like I see him enough. I want more Charles. I want him to show, because he's actually quite fun on some level, isn't he? And every time we get a delightful little bit of Charles sort of off-camera being relaxed, he's a hugger. The Queen was actually quite stoical and don't touch the Queen, whereas he is, very affable with people, isn't he? Do you think we should get a bit more of him?
Well, I think we will, because he's going to be on some state visits in due course. And I think, they've sort of gone away private for the holidays, so they're sort of locked away a bit. But now we'll see him going to Paris. And I think the testament to his popularity, he's actually going to be speaking in the French Parliament. His mother never did that. And he speaks a bit of French as well.
But didn't he speak German in the German Parliament not long ago?
So actually what you're proving there is that other countries see his position and do understand what he's about and the significance of him. So I think we do realise, and people who are in touch with him around the Prince's Trust and some of the other organisations involved have nothing but admiration for his interest and concern. And you've seen it, that documentary about the repair shop, which was really interesting and sort of showing him in a really good light, So I think the PR machine will be in full swing, but he does seem to have enjoyed his first year. It's not easy taking over from a figure who's dominated the landscape for 70 years, but I think he can look back with a degree of satisfaction that, in fact, that he has managed to get it right in the main from the moment, apart from the Pen Gate, I don't think things have gone horribly wrong.
No, I couldn't agree more. Rupert, thank you so much. Rupert Bell, their Talk Radio's royal correspondent.